Chapter 727, War. 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 White River City, Zero Wings Guild residence. Due to the Star Alliance's sudden provocation, Zero Wing was in disarray previously. The guild's lack of response towards the Dark God's Legion's annihilation had caused many members within the guild to feel dejected. If not for Aqua Rose holding everyone back, many members would have rushed to the Stoneclaw Mountains to seek revenge. Now that the Star Alliance had launched such a challenge as well, how could they contain their anger? As it was difficult to locate a small number of independent players, they could have ignored the previous assault. However, it was a different story with the Star Alliance. Their enemy had even prepared a battlefield. Even if the Star Alliance was a first-rate guild and had set up a trap, they needed to show everyone that Zero Wing was not a guild to provoke. At worst, they'd just have to die once Vice Leader Aqua. Everyone in the guild is ready to fight. If you give the word, we'll leave immediately and annihilate the Star Alliance. Many core members stepped forward and declared Zero Wing was no longer the weak upstart guild it had been before. Now, it was White River City's overlord. The guild already had over 100,000 members. They even had close to 20,000 elite members. Although the others were not elites, they were not far from it. Either they could definitely put up a fight against the Star Alliance. You guys are taking this situation too lightly. Since the Star Alliance has dared to provoke us openly, they are confident in defeating us. Moreover, the Star Alliance is not our only enemy, Aqua Rose said, shaking her head. After seeing that forum post, it would be a lie if she said she wasn't enraged. If she were an ordinary guild member, she would have torn apart the Star Alliance's members on the battlefield by now. However, she was not an ordinary member of the guild, so she could not do so. She had to consider the guild as a whole. As long as it was not one of the guild's important figures, even if they died tens of times, it would not impact the guild. However, if every elite member died even once, the guild would be wounded. If that happened, the best-case scenario would be the guild's development slowing down and losing its previous advantages. In a more severe case, the guild's development would stagnate, and from then on, the guild would no longer be able to contest for supremacy over God's domain. All of their time and efforts would be for naught. Such a situation had occurred many times throughout the virtual gaming world's history. The guilds involved had long since been forgotten. Hence, a guild had to be extremely cautious with each step it advanced. Passion was not enough for a guild to become an overlord in God's domain. Otherwise, there would not be so few first-rate guilds yet. If Zero Wing, the overlord of White River City, did not respond to the Star Alliance's provocation properly, then any prestige the guild had gained would vanish like smoke. Who would join such a guild in the future? The Star Alliance has stooped low this time. They are actually using such a despicable tactic, Fire Dance said, frowning. However, if we accept their challenge, the Flower of Seven Sins will assist them from the sidelines, targeting our guild's experts. The other guilds might even try to take advantage of the situation and strike as well. The Star Alliance will devour us. Fire, you fought a party leader from the Flower of Seven Sins before. Do our main force and the Dark God's Legion really stand no chance against them? Aqua Rose asked as she gave Fire Dance a concerned look. The Flower of Seven Sins have equipment that is in no way inferior to our main forces. Only those of us wearing Tier 1 set equipment are slightly stronger than them. However, they are experts who have the experience of many years of trials and tribulations. Even the organization's most ordinary member is only slightly weaker than I am in terms of combat techniques. The majority of their members are a lot stronger than me. If not for my weapons and equipment, as well as magic scrolls and the power of darkness, I wouldn't have lasted against that party leader for long. When I faced that party leader, his defense was impeccable. He was able to see through all of my attacks easily and prepare. It felt as if I were fighting our guild leader. He had never dreamed that he would face off against them. He had not expected the shift in their positions, either in the past. Even if he had gone all out and pushed his senses to their limits, he would barely be able to contend with any of these experts, yet now, these experts had to work together and fight with everything they had just to have any chance of survival against him. Although these people worked together for the first time, they fell into a defensive formation seamlessly despite the previous sneak attack. They calmly considered and executed the best strategy to deal with him. The extent of their combat experience was obvious. This was precisely what Fire Dance and the others lacked the most. Although Shifeng had charged at his enemy after using Skywill Sword, Endless Plains had fired a storm of arrows the moment he set foot into the sword domain. Not only were the ranger's attacks extremely fast, but they limited Shifeng's range of movement, forcing him to confront the two oncoming MTS Black Flame. Show me just how good you are. The tall and robust World Defender stood proudly before Shifeng as he activated a series of life-saving skills in quick succession. Bloodthirsty Rage, Tier 1 skill. Recovers 3% HP every second for 10 seconds. Shield Wall, Tier 1 skill. Decreases all damage by 60% for 18 seconds. Last Stand, Tier 1 skill. Increases maximum HP by 30% for 30 seconds. Suddenly, World Defender's HP rose from close to 12,000 to nearly 15,600. He also recovered to more than 10,000 HP standing a short distance away. Thousand Hunts similarly activated his life-saving skills. He also used a Tier 1 Holy Shield Protection, which could absorb over 2,000 points of damage, on himself. When the shield broke, it would heal the player for over 1,000 HP. Following which, Thousand Hunts activated Justice Roar. Enemies, players or monsters, affected by the skill would have to attack him. If they didn't, he would receive a boost to his speed and damage. Feeling the effects of Thousand Hunts' Justice Roar, Shifeng could not ignore the Guardian Knight. Dashing up to Thousand Hunts, the Abyssal Blade transformed into numerous black streaks of light that descended on the Guardian Knight's body so fast. Thousand Hunts was shocked. He had never imagined that Shifeng's attack speed would be so fast. He could not even see the afterimages of Shifeng's attacks. Fortunately, he wielded a shield. Compared to players without shields, he had an easier time defending against attacks. As long as he moved the shield slightly, he could block close to half of his body, making it very difficult to strike him. Thousand Hunts moved his shield quickly, blocking the Abyssal Blade. However, Shifeng did not bother changing the Abyssal Blade's trajectory. Instead, he continued swinging the magic weapon at Thousand Hunts' illusory shadow. The Abyssal Blade passed through the Guardian Knight's shield, the 6 black streaks of light penetrating the Holy Shield protection before biting into Thousand Hunts. 1, 274-2, 604-1, 295-2, 582-3, 829-1, 285. 6 consecutive damages appeared above Thousand Hunts' head. His HP, which had been over 9,000, plummeted to 0. How could this be possible? Thousand Hunts could not believe what he was seeing. Despite Protection Blessing, reducing the damage he received by 60%, Black Flame had killed him without breaking a sweat. The other experts were similarly dumbfounded. A Guardian Knight with more than 9,000 HP remaining and Protection Blessing had died instantly. Just how high is his attack power? World Defender no longer dared to waste time with attacks. Instead, he used Charge at the Swordsman. Turning, Shifeng used Silent Steps, appearing behind World Defender and brandishing Killing Ray. His witnesses only saw a flash of emerald thundering flash. Like a roaring dragon, 3 blue streaks of lightning instantly devoured World Defender. 2, 746-7, 087-4 for 24. World Defender's HP, which had been over 10,000, vanished instantly, his body falling slowly to the ground. Chapter 733, Unstoppable. How could this be? Shock shook Endless Plains' heart when he saw World Defender and Thousand Hunts' lifeless bodies on the ground. He could no longer maintain his previous calm. Both of these MTs had activated all of their life-saving skills, yet each of them had only lasted one move against Black Flame. They lost their lives before they could work with anyone else on the team to deal with Black Flame. Is he really a player? They could not help but remember Black Flame's title of One-Hit Asura. However, everyone finally understood something. Against Black Flame's attacks, the only thing they could do was dodge. That's too. World Defender's quick death had not particularly surprised Shifeng. After all, not only had his one-handed sword mastery reached the basic Sword King standard, but the aura of fire also increased his damage by another 50%. Even an MT with all of their life-saving skills active would be paper in front of his swords. Shifeng then shifted his gaze towards the nearest assassin Wind Blade. Suddenly, Shifeng left behind an afterimage as he appeared before the level 33 assassin, his killing ray slicing through the air. Don't think that I'm that easy to kill. The assassin abruptly retreated as Shifeng appeared before him and tried to activate Vanish. When activate, Vanish would provide him with nearly of invulnerability. Within this second, all attacks against him would be useless. However, Killing Ray's lightning effect triggered the instant Shifeng swung Killing Ray. He gained a 50% boost to his attack speed. Like a flash of light, Killing Ray danced across the assassin's body. 13,548. It was another instant kill. As if that had been a cue, the rest of the team bombarded Shifeng with attacks. Numerous arrows and spells flew at Shifeng. Sidestepping, Shifeng jumped into the air, avoiding the oncoming attacks. Following which, he turned and retrieved the blazing meteor. With a flick of his wrist, a meteor suddenly flew from Shifeng's hand. Flame God's Fury. Flame God's Fury deals physical and flame damage to enemies within a 40 by 3 yard area. Deals 900% damage to the initial target, and damage reduces by 10% with each consecutive enemy hit to a minimum of 500% damage. Show. An elementalist, a cursemancer, and a summoner, who were in the midst of spellcasting, could not avoid the attack in time. The crimson flames devoured them in an instant. The remaining experts were shocked. They had never imagined that Black Flame would also possess such powerful long-range attack capabilities. As soon as Shifeng landed, over a dozen frost arrows descended on him. Endless Plains had grasped the timing of his attack. Not only had he predicted Shifeng's landing position, but his arrows also blocked off Shifeng's path of retreat. He had aimed several other arrows at Shifeng's vital points. Dang! 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 Before 5 frost arrows could strike Shifeng, they pinged against the swordsman's emerald blade. The remaining frost arrows simply brushed past Shifeng's body, dealing no damage whatsoever. F***ck my life. Endless Plains stared, stunned. Despite his perfect angle of attack and timing, it seemed as if his arrows had actually tried to avoid Black Flame. After dealing with the attacks, Shifeng released a low shout. Dragon Breath. He fired a white beam from his mouth. Endless Plains threw his body to the side, hoping to avoid the incoming beam. However, as if this white beam had predicted the ranger's actions, the beam plowed into the ranger. Shifeng achieved another instant kill. Even after death, Endless Plains was confused. No matter how he thought about it, why would he have jumped into the Dragon Breath's path? However, Violet Cloud, who happily massacred the Elite Legion, was not the slightest bit surprised when she saw this scene. Shifeng had already reached the flowing water realm of the realms of refinement. He could easily predict a player's movements by observing their body. Hence, after seeing Endless Plains' intention, he had adjusted Dragon Breath's trajectory before firing the skill. Although nearly 20 yards stood between them, Endless Plains had yet to set foot into the realms of refinement. He lacked sufficient physical control. In such high-speed battles, he could not respond quickly enough to evade the Dragon Breath. Violet Cloud side. This was the watershed of top-tier experts. Although the difference seemed insignificant, its impact on the battle's outcome would be astounding. Extremely few ordinary players in God's domain could exert their virtual bodies to their very limits. On the other hand, thanks to their refined control over their own bodies, expert players could sometimes push their virtual bodies to their limits. Naturally, if both sides possessed equal levels and attributes, expert players were far more powerful. However, even top-tier experts would find it extremely difficult to adjust their movement in such a superhuman, high-speed battle. It was like a sprinter's difficulty to stop after running at full speed. In a battle this fast, one could just stop without effort. However, experts who had reached the realms of refinement were capable of exactly that. Although it did not appear impressive, having the ability to accelerate and stop suddenly meant that a player could change their attack trajectories abruptly. confusing the enemy. Violet Cloud had already reached the half-step refinement realm. However, even now, she could not break through that final barrier. Hence, Violet Cloud observed Shifeng's battle carefully while fighting her own, hoping to gain some insight. The elite players who had intended to help were stupefied. In just 2 seconds, Shifeng had killed 7 of their experts. None of them had been able to withstand even one of his attacks. If even experts had no defense against him, what could elite players like themselves hope to accomplish? Those who had intended to rush over and assist lost all their courage instantly. Screams echoed from all across the mountaintop. Even for elite players, it was extremely difficult to exert their bodies to their limits. Not to mention, the members of Zero Wing's main force all had very high attributes. Their limits were much higher than elite players. This was no longer a battle. This was a massacre. Weaving through the crowd, Fire Dance moved faster than any of these elites players could follow. And as she moved, Fire Dance plunged the true fire blades into every player she passed, taking their lives with just a few hits. After just a brief moment, corpses littered the field. Dashing into the crowd, Shadow Sword brandished his blue fire double-edged sword madly. He sent the several shield warriors, who had charged at him, flying. The Berserker then followed up with a flame flash, blue fire devouring these shield warriors instantly. He used Whirlwind Slash to finish them off. Standing on a natural rise, Minor Wind launched a continuous stream of powerful arrows with his Windchaser. The power within a single arrow was enough to push back a Berserker, a class known for its strength. Even though many elite players tried to approach the Ranger, against the dozens of arrows, these elite players became no more than lifeless pincushions. Aqua Rose, Blackie, and the other magical classes released one AoE spell after another, killing dozens of players with every attack. In just a few minutes, the 2,000-strong Elite Legion had less than 1,000 players remaining. In contrast, Zero Wing's main force had not suffered a single casualty yet. Why are they so strong? Are they really human? I don't want to fight anymore. I want to go home. This situation was nothing like the videos they had watched of experts exchanging moves. Now that they witnessed a true battle between experts, they finally understood just how huge of a gap there was between themselves and expert players. Suddenly, fear swept across the battlefield. The Elite Legion's members refused to continue fighting as they fled in all directions. While Zero Wing's main force fought, the situation in the Stoneclaw Mountains grew increasingly intense. Both sides' armies had finally begun fighting a short distance away from the foot of the mountain. How dare you face us with just 10,000 players? Everyone, charge! Kill them all! Red Feather sneered as he glared at Zero Wing's elite members. Chapter 737, Absolute Power. The appearance and disappearance of the black and white pillar of light stunned everyone. The power of this sudden attack was simply devastating. The shocking scene etched itself deep into everyone's minds. It was difficult to forget even if one wanted to. Just what was that thing? At this moment, looking at the half-kneeling mountain giant, the shock Gentle Snow felt was indescribable with words. It would have been fine if the pillar of light had just killed every player within a radius of 200 yards. However, not only had the devastating attack dealt over 4 million damage to the level 54 Great Lord, but it had also placed the mountain giant in a heavily injured state, immobilizing it. Although the mountain giant could still fight, its controller, Purple Eye, had already died within the Pillar of Light. Normally, summoned creatures could only move within a certain range from their summoners. They could not leave this area. Meanwhile, if the summoner died, the summoned creature would also vanish. One could say that this dependence on the summoner was the weakness of a Tier 3 summoning scroll. Initially, Gentle Snow had also considered killing the player controlling the Great Lord. However, it was simply impossible for them to circle around the Great Lord and break through the numerous elite players protecting the summoner. Hence, they could only retreat in defeat. But with this devastating power, not to mention killing the controller, even killing the Great Lord would not be a problem compared to the shock Gentle Snow and the other members of Ouroboros were feeling. The members of the Star Alliance were utterly dumbfounded. If just a single attack could kill over 1,000 players, wouldn't it be only a moment's effort to finish off tens of thousands of players? Just how were they supposed to go up against this power? Setting aside the fact that the attack covered a radius of 200 yards, the speed of that attack was simply not one that players could dodge. One could say that the instant the black and white beam of light appeared, everyone within its range of attack only had death awaiting them. Suddenly, everyone could not help but turn to look at the origin of that beam of light. Black flame. Galaxy Past's eyes immediately turned crimson with rage, his expression becoming exceedingly ugly. Galaxy Past had known the location of Zero Wing's main force ever since Shurfeng launched his attack on the elite legion stationed on the mountain. The only reason he had not sent anyone after them was because he intended to have the Flower of Seven Sins finish the job. He had never imagined that Shurfeng would have such a card as well. In just a single attack, Shurfeng had exterminated one of his trump cards. The Star Alliance had paid an unimaginable price to obtain that Tier 3 summoning scroll. Moreover, this price did not take the form of coins. Instead, it was the magic crystals that the Star Alliance had amassed with much difficulty during this period. Yet, now, before the mountain giant could even begin to display its strength, Shurfeng had already wiped it out of existence. At this moment, Galaxy Past wished he could rip out Shurfeng's heart with his very own hands. Kill them all. That kind of attack should only be usable once. Victory still belongs to us. Galaxy Past immediately notified everyone as he began attacking the members of Ouroboros in a frenzy. Due to Galaxy Past's reminder, everyone from the Star Alliance quickly regained their senses. Launching such a heaven-defying attack even once was already plenty amazing. The possibility of Zero Wing pulling off another such attack should be extremely low currently. Although one of their two great lords had been defeated, they still had one left. The advantage their side possessed had yet to disappear. Zero Wing and Ouroboros were still on the losing side. Aqua, how long till the next shot? Shurfeng could not help but ask as he saw the Star Alliance going into action once more. The requirements to use the Mana Pulse cannon were extremely stringent. It had its limitations. Firstly, the cannon could not be used inside dungeons. Otherwise, dealing with dungeon bosses would be a piece of cake. A few shots would be all it would take to clear the dungeon. Secondly, the cannon had a relatively long cooldown time after firing before it could fire again. Normally, this cooldown was roughly 3 to 4 minutes long. Thirdly, it was extremely costly to fire the cannon, with each shot costing 1,000 magic crystals. Even ordinary large guilds were unlikely to obtain 1,000 magic crystals in a day. Yet, the basic Mana Pulse cannon only needed an instant to waste it all. In terms of coins, the cannon cost over 200 gold to fire each time. To first-rate guilds, 200 gold was not a small amount, not to mention 1,000 magic crystals. Even if first-rate guilds possessed a basic Mana Pulse cannon, they would not be willing to use it unless absolutely necessary. There's still another 30 seconds, Aqua Rose, who was controlling the Mana Pulse cannon, immediately replied after taking a look at the cooldown time. Previously, she had felt slightly confused when Shurfeng had asked her and Blackie to follow him. However, after Shurfeng took out the basic Mana Pulse cannon, she was left dumbfounded for a long time. She never imagined there would be such a horrifying weapon even in God's domain. Of course, one also needed considerable financial strength to use this horrific weapon. First and foremost, the basic Mana Pulse cannon's selling price of 20,000 gold was enough to deter the majority of the guilds in God's domain from buying it. The next part was the fuel of 1,000 magic crystals. If Zero Wing had not occupied Stone Forest Town and could not collect a large amount of magic crystals from the various large guilds every day, using the mana pulse cannon would really have been too expensive. However, she also could not help but admit that this money was well spent. Just a single shot had directly stunned everyone in the Stoneclaw Mountains. However, compared to the cannon's actual effects, its impact on morale was much more amazing. In a war, if one side's momentum were suppressed by the other, this would greatly affect the spirits of both sides, regardless of whether it was the stronger side or the weaker side. Alright. The next target will be that Cerberus. Make sure you don't let the summoner get away, Sherfone commanded. He then messaged Gentle Snow, having her lure the Cerberus as close as possible to the basic mana pulse cannon. The basic mana pulse cannon only had a shooting range of 15,000 yards. Beyond this range, the cannon was no threat. After receiving Sherfang's message, Gentle Snow immediately began directing Ouroboros's army with renewed vigor, to move closer to Sherfang's location. Seeing the members of Ouroboros escaping, the players on the Star Alliance's side naturally gave chase. The duration of a summoned creature was limited. Obviously, they needed to achieve the greatest results during this time limit. 30 seconds quickly passed. Yuri next. Aqua Rose aimed at the approaching Cerberus and fired the mana pulse cannon once more. The black and white beam of light shot directly at the three-headed hound. Despite the distance of several thousand yards, the energy pulse of the mana pulse cannon took only an instant to hit a spot close to the Cerberus. When the black and white pillar of light appeared in the Stoneclaw Mountains once more, every player at the outer area of the dungeon was able to see it clearly. Warwolf had noticed the energy pulse the moment it appeared. However, he instantly knew that it was too late to avoid it. The only thing he could do was activate every life-saving skill he possessed. However, the energy pulse, which had the might of a Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell, was not something a measly Tier 1 player could defend against. Even for Sherfone, his only option when going up against this attack would be to activate space movement to escape. The aura of Earth's absolute defense might not even be able to defend against this move, as invulnerability in God's domain was not absolute. If an attack surpassed the limit a skill could endure, it would likewise break through the skill. After the black and white light pillar dissipated, as expected, Warwolf had fallen to the energy pulse. The Cerberus had disappeared as well together with Warwolf. At the same time, over 1,000 overwhelming Smile members had also been turned into ash, leaving behind only a crater filled with equipment. Chapter 738, 7 Sins Take Action. The reappearance of the black and white light pillar and the new wave of devastation that came with it stunned just about everyone in the Stoneclaw Mountains. Had once more stunned everyone in the Stoneclaw Mountains. For a moment, they had forgotten to fight as they turned to watch Pillar of Light. In the face of this horrific power, the prowess of tens of thousands of players was a joke. Complete annihilation could happen at any minute. Although the energy pulse had killed was only over 1,000 players, a deep fear of the weapon had seeped into their bones. Nobody wanted to be on the receiving end of that attack, disintegrating into dust suddenly. Everyone, players from the Star Alliance and various guilds alike, feared Zero Wing. They were deeply afraid that Zero Wing would launch another such attack. After the energy pulse first appeared, they consoled themselves that it was impossible to use such an attack twice. However, that consolation vanished after the second energy pulse. Players would lose one level when they died. However, losing a level in the 30s would require several days to recover. At the thought of losing their lives to a single attack, the Star Alliance and its allies began to move cautiously. The various troops reigned in their bloodlust. After all, if they attracted too much attention, Armageddon could come knocking on their doors next. In contrast, Ouroboros and Zero Wing's morale flourished, the members of both guilds passionately launching their counterattacks. One side held back with caution, while the other side forged on with guns blazing. The battle's outcome was obvious. Damn it. Just where did Black Flame get that thing? Galaxy Past scowled. That energy pulse attack was simply too much of a threat to the Star Alliance. If they did not deal with it quickly, they would certainly lose this war. Losing this war would be a fatal blow to the guild. The loss of EXP and equipment was a secondary concern. Most importantly, the Star Alliance's prestige as a first-rate guild would vanish. Not only had the Star Alliance challenged an upstart guild like Zero Wing, but it even lost miserably. In the future, how was the Alliance supposed to compete with Ouroboros in Starmoon City? Meanwhile, if Zero Wing won this war, not only would it gain more prestige, but the guild would also see a flood of players trying to join, which, in turn, would allow the guild's strength to grow. Just how was the Star Alliance supposed to capture Stone Forest Town? Red Feather, lead the main army and annihilate Black Flame. We cannot allow him to fire that thing again. After considering his options, Galaxy Pass did not believe that they could allow Zero Wing to occupy that mountain any longer. With the mountain's vantage point, Zero Wing could fire that energy pulse anywhere on the battlefield they wanted. If they could evict Zero Wing quickly, then the threat of mass destruction would lessen. Hence, it was imperative that they remove Zero Wing from the mountain. As for Zero Wing's elite army, it was no longer important. Rest assured, guild leader. I'll lead a unit to annihilate Black Flame. Red Feather understood the importance of his task. Moreover, this was the perfect chance to avenge the humiliation he had previously suffered. He had only sent his subordinates to deal with Black Flame during the battle in White River City, yet, in the end, not one of the 6 subordinates he sent had returned alive. This time, he intended to deal with Star Moon Kingdom's #1 expert personally. Brother Glorious, I'll have to trouble you to inform the Flower of 7 Sins. Hopefully, they can act as soon as possible. This way, we'll be able to end this battle a little sooner, rather than continuing to waste resources. As insurance, Galaxy Pass still decided to deploy the Flower of 7 Sins. Exemplary Willow had intended to force Black Flame to taste despair. Hence, she had ordered them to wipe out Zero Wing's elites before hunting Black Flame and Zero Wing's upper echelons. However, that plan was no longer viable. That energy pulse was simply too much of a threat. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's main force had occupied a location that was easy to hold but difficult to attack. With the combat power of Zero Wing's main force, although Red Feather led many elite members, they could not exert their maximum power. No one was certain that they could chase Black Flame and his team off that mountain if the battle dragged on and Zero Wing was allowed to fire that energy pulse a few more times. It could turn the tide of this war. Hence, for safety's sake, it would be more efficient for the Flower of 7 Sins assassins to take action. If the Flower of 7 Sins could take down Zero Wing's upper echelons quickly, they could deal a massive blow to both Zero Wing and Ouroboros. The Star Alliance could regain its lost momentum in full. It would be much easier to annihilate the remaining elite members of the 2 guilds. I'll notify them right away, Glorious Echo replied. He, too, realized the severity of the situation. His previous carefree expression had vanished. The war that had clearly been in their favor had suddenly taken a 180-degree turn. If they idled, this war would lose all meaning, even if they killed Zero Wing's upper echelons. Exemplary Willow wanted an overwhelming victory in addition to Black Flame's despair. If he told Exemplary Willow that they had won a Pyrrhic victory, the woman might even skin him alive. Finally, want us to join the fray? A silver-robed man asked. This middle-aged man carried a black spear on his back and chuckled when he received Glorious Echo's callies. I hope you can finish the job as soon as possible. Glorious Echo nodded. Relax. As long as we make a move, Black Flame's time in this world will be limited, the silver-robed man laughed. He then disconnected the call and looked to the others, saying, let's begin. Don't forget your targets. You are only allowed to attack someone else after your target is dead. Although they were all extremely powerful, top-tier experts, when dealing with this silver-robed man, they could not help but shiver as they nodded their heads respectfully. The Flower of 7 Sins was an organization where strength meant everything. The silver-robed man was stronger than every one of them. Hence, he had full command of this operation. Just as the Flower of 7 Sins assassins made their way towards Shifeng's peak, the secret pavilion's members, who had watched from afar, began to move. I had not expected Zero Wing to obtain such a strategic tool. It's no wonder why it grew from an upstart guild to its present power. If not for the Flower of 7 Sins, Zero Wing might really win this war. Yuan Tianxin shuddered when he recalled the prior devastation. If Zero Wing could obtain several more tools, who could possibly stand up to it in the future? However, this event had reminded him of one thing: wars in God's domain were not won just by relying on elite and expert players. Such strategic tools were similarly very important. While the Star Alliance mobilized a unit, approaching Shifeng's position, Shifeng used this time to fire the Mana Pulse Cannon a few more times, annihilating thousands of the Star Alliance's members. The Star Alliance's expert team, which faced the Dark God's Legion, also received a shot. The energy pulse had instantly disintegrated close to half of the expert team, alleviating the pressure on the Dark God's Legion. This situation had nearly caused the upper echelons of the Star Alliance and the various other guilds to faint. Guild leader, as expected, they're approaching. Should we have the nearby elite legion head our way and assist us? That way, we'll have an easier time holding this area, Fire Dance asked Shifeng as she watched the elite army gather at the foot of the mountain. With only Zero Wing's main force, it would be extremely difficult to secure this location. No need. Having more people will only hinder us. Shifeng waved his hand. He then took out the Bible of Darkness and the Tier 3 Magic Amplification Scroll from his bag, smiling faintly. Chapter 739, 100 vs 20,000. The Star Alliance had dispatched an army of 20,000 elite players to surround Shifeng's mountaintop. Even if Shifeng and the others were more powerful, they would never escape an army of 20,000 elite players and numerous experts. Everyone, split up as much as possible and attack in groups. Be careful of Zero Wing's AoE spells. Red Feather commanded. The Star Alliance had investigated Zero Wing's main force members extensively. Blackie's Stars of Light and Shifeng's Firestorm were the army's biggest threats. These two spells had displayed their frightening, destructive power many times in the past. If they charged as one, they would be no more than target practice. Even without the Flower of Seven Sins, 20,000 elite players are more than enough to drown Black Flame's group of 100. Cold Autumn, who watched from a nearby mountaintop, could not help but sigh at the sea of players as they climbed the mountain. Players' stamina in God's domain was not unlimited. It might have been fine if Zero Wing fought ordinary players, but not only was every member of the 20,000-man army an elite, but the army also contained plenty of experts. This battle would not end quickly. If Zero Wing faced only common monsters, it might have a chance at victory. After all, common monsters did not require much from players. There was no need to push oneself to the limit to fight such opponents. In a normal battle, players could fight for a very long time. However, it was a different story in a high-speed battle where it was necessary to remain at one's peak. This would have a high demand of one's stamina and concentration. This was like running a marathon. A runner might have the stamina to jog 10 kilometers, but not at full speed. It'd be a miracle if an experienced runner could run a full kilometer at full speed. It was the same concept with maintaining one's peak during combat. If they, the younger generation of the Secret Pavilion, were the ones to fight in this battle, let alone 20,000 players, even 10,000 players would be more than enough to drown them to death. They could only retreat if they wanted to survive. Choosing to fight would simply lead to their grave. The fact that the Star Alliance had dispatched 20,000 elites to entrap Black Flame and his team showed just how afraid the Alliance was of the Swordsman. Ordinary top-tier experts would not warrant such treatment. Meanwhile, as the war raged, the official forums exploded with comments. Zero Wing is too amazing. They're actually going up against 20,000 people with a team of 100. I wonder who will win. I wish I could watch this battle in person. I'm guessing that Zero Wing will wipe. We're talking about 20,000 guild elite members. Indeed. That's 20,000 elite players, not 20,000 common monsters. If Zero Wing comes out victorious, they will be a legend in God's domain. I wonder how many people Zero Wing's 100 members will kill. This battle would determine the supremacy over the Stoneclaw Mountains. Hence, the players throughout Star Moon Kingdom paid very close attention to it. Moreover, one did not often see a guild war of this scale. Aside from the forum discussions, players also broadcasted live streams of the war on the official forums. For this war, the Star Alliance did not bother with chasing away outsiders. Instead, the guild allowed other players to watch. They wanted everyone to know how powerful the Star Alliance was. Only, the Star Alliance had begun to regret that decision. Advance. Show everyone the consequences for opposing the Star Alliance. Red Feather shouted suddenly. The army of 20,000 elite players ascended the mountain, leaving no gaps for Zero Wing to escape through. They intended to wipe out Black Flame and his team when the Star Alliance's army was halfway up the mountain. A black figure suddenly appeared in midair. Whenever the figure flapped its pitch-black wings, it generated powerful winds. Why is a demon here? Everyone from the Star Alliance turned to look at the figure. Battle demon. Level 55. HP 11,000,000/11,000,000. While everyone was caught in a daze, the battle demon lifted its twin blood-red war axes and swooped down into the crowd. Swinging its weapons, the battle demon created a storm that sent all players within a radius of 15 yards flying into the air, the countless wind blades ending their lives. Once the violent storm ended, hundreds of pieces of equipment fell from the sky. Everyone involuntarily shuddered. With players' current standard, none of them had any hope against a level 55 tier 3 creature. No. This is Zero Wings Demon. All melee players, scatter. Ranged players, distance yourselves from the demon and use barrier magic arrays to trap it. Red Feather immediately commanded. Although the demon's sudden appearance had surprised him, he remained relatively calm. Although barrier magic arrays were rare, a first-rate guild like the Star Alliance had quite a few in reserve. They might not be able to kill the tier 3 demon, but they could confine it for a while. However, Shurfeng had no intentions of giving the Star Alliance the opportunity to trap the demon. The demons he summoned with the Bible of Darkness were different from the creatures summoned with summoning scrolls. The demons could be controlled from a very long distance. Hence, Shurfeng directed the battle demon to fly into the air and attack other locations. Despite the constant attacks from the Star Alliance's players, due to the level and tier suppression, their damage was practically negligible. In such a way, the battle demon repeatedly struck and fled every time the players with the barrier scrolls reached the battle. The demon was out of reach for a time. The Star Alliance's army plunged into chaos. Red Feather's eyes were bloodshot with fury as he roared deafeningly. Watching this madness repeat again and again, it was already difficult enough to deal with a tier 3 demon. Now, the demon ran about randomly, wreaking havoc wherever it went. To the Star Alliance, this demon was a nightmare. They were sheep to the slaughter. A casual assault could kill several hundred players. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before the demon annihilated their army of 20,000 elite players. Guild leader, you really are amazing. You can actually summon such a powerful tier 3 demon. With this, the Star Alliance will suffer. Blackie rejoiced as he watched the battle demon massacre the Star Alliance's elites. Previously, the two great lords the Star Alliance and Overwhelming Smile had summoned had dealt quite the blow. Just when he thought that this war had been over, Shurfeng revealed the basic mana pulse cannon. With just 2 shots, they had dealt with the two great lords, forcing the Star Alliance to send out an army of players. Now, Shurfeng had summoned a tier 3 demon in such a narrow mountain path. A tier 3 demon was far more effective than several thousand elite players. Ignore that demon. Charge up the mountain. If we kill the summoner, that demon will disappear. Galaxy Past, who commanded the battle against Ouroboros in the distance, suddenly shouted in the guild chat. Regardless of how powerful a summoned creature was, its summoner was always its weakness. Rather than wasting time with the tier 3 demon, it was more effective to attack its summoner. Zero Wing itself had taught them this lesson. Sure enough, after Galaxy Past's reminder, the Star Alliance's elites calmed themselves and pushed up the mountain, leaving only the barrier team behind to deal with the tier 3 demon. Guild leader, they're coming. Should I fire? Blackie asked as he watched the elite army charge at them like a swarm of ants. He desperately wanted to use stars of light to show the Star Alliance who they were dealing with. Before replying, Shurfeng glanced at a 50-man team that climbed the mountain path swiftly. With a serious expression, he said, "Save it for now. We can deal with the Star Alliance after we deal with the Flower of 7 Sins." Chapter 740, Top-Tier Battle. Hearing Shurfeng's comment, Fire Dance and the others turned towards the Flower of 7 Sins approach. If they had to name their greatest threat in this war, it was definitely not the Star Alliance's army of over 100,000 elite players. It was the 50-man team from the Flower of 7 Sins. Watching the assassins close the distance between them, Fire Dance and the others grew nervous. They knew that, should the assassins defeat them here, their previous efforts would be for naught. Don't hold back against them. Use the power of darkness right from the start, Shifeng reminded his team through the team chat. Victory or defeat, let it be determined within these 10 minutes. In terms of techniques, the Flower of Seven Sins was leaps and bounds above them. They only had two advantages. First, they had more numbers on their side. Second, they had the advantage of Berserk skills. The power of darkness had a duration of 10 minutes. Ordinary Berserk skills generally only lasted a fraction of that time. When they activated the power of darkness, their opponents would have no choice but to activate theirs as well. If they could last through the duration of the Flower of Seven Sins Berserk skills, they would emerge victorious. Shifeng directed the battle demon to charge at the assassins with flying speed. With the overwhelming combat power of a Tier 3 demon, it should be simple to defeat the 50-man team of assassins. Do you think you can stop the Flower of Seven Sins with a single Tier 3 demon? The silver-robed man glanced at the battle demon flying towards his team, a playful smile appearing on his face. He then revealed a black magic scroll. Unfurling it, he shouted, "I summon the Magma Giant." Suddenly, a massive humanoid figure covered in molten lava appeared on the mountain. Lava Giant, elemental being, Great Lord. Level 55. HP 18,000,000/18,000,000. The instant the lava giant appeared, it released an angry bellow and lifted both its hands. Suddenly, lava spewed from the ground and swept across the mountaintop, transforming an area of 300 yards around the lava giant into a lava domain. Not only did the lava domain suppress enemies' attributes, but it also ate away 3% of their HPs every 5 seconds. Players could not fight within the domain for very long at all. After establishing its domain, the lava giant tightly clasped both its hands together. In the next moment, hot lava began to spew into the air, engulfing the battle demon and preventing it from moving. A Great Lord actually knows a domain skill and a Tier 3 imprisonment skill. The Flower of Seven Sins is even willing to part with such a summoning scroll? Shifeng could not help his frown. A Tier 3 imprisonment skill could seal the battle demon's movements for a very long time. However, throughout the skill's duration, the caster could not move. Both summoned creatures had been taken out of this fight. However, the Flower of Seven Sins had the aid of a domain skill, which was a significant disadvantage for Zero Wing. Give up. Nobody can avoid the Flower of Seven Sins assassins. The silver-robed man chuckled. The lava domain had already enveloped the mountaintop. Zero Wing's members were trapped inside. Moreover, with the suppression and HP reduction effects, even if Zero Wing's members activated their Berserk skills, they would not survive for long inside the lava domain. In the end, death would be waiting to greet them. That isn't necessarily true. Watching the assassins charge at them, Shifeng suddenly shouted, "Activate the magic array." Suddenly, a purple-gold magic array appeared in the air, enveloping both Zero Wing and the Flower of Seven Sins. This magic array was none other than the intermediate magic array, 9-star polar domain, that Shifeng had previously obtained. As long as the 9-star polar domain was active, people outside the barrier could not enter. Similarly, those inside could not leave. Only after the 9 casters' mana ran out would the barrier disappear. Moreover, the 9-star polar domain also suppressed the assassin's attributes. Furthermore, its suppression was more powerful than the lava domain's. The lava domain could suppress a player's attributes by 30%, whereas the 9-star polar domain could suppress a player's attributes by 40%. Against high-tiered monsters, it could suppress over 70% of their attributes. It was an extremely powerful magic array. When the players outside of the barrier saw Zero Wing and the Flower of Seven Sins' various combat methods, they were momentarily stunned. Very good. At least things are getting a little interesting now. The silver-robed man could not help but laugh. Let's see which one of us will last until the very end. Saying so, the members of the Flower of Seven Sins activated their Berserk skills. Although they suffered a more powerful suppression, the lava domain would chip away at Zero Wing's HPs. If they dragged on the battle, they could win easily. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's side similarly activated the power of darkness. Suddenly, both sides attributes soared, their combat powers reaching greater heights than before. With only a few dozen yards between them, they began to launch ranged attack spells and arrows flew at their targets. However, neither side was easy to defeat as they weaved between the rain of spells and arrows in the blink of an eye. The distance between the two teams closed. The melee classes exchanged blows rapidly, their bodies moving with blurring speed. Fire Dance immediately set her sights on a level 34 cleric. Using shadow steps, she appeared behind the cleric and activated the assassin class strongest skill, Absolute Strike. However, this cleric had sensed Fire Dance's approach. Not only did he manage to activate Truth Shield before Fire Dance's attack reached him, but he also activated Terrorizing Roar. Fire Dance was forced to activate a control removal skill. Afterward, she thrust her short sword towards the cleric. In response, the cleric used his staff to block the attack. As Fire Dance possessed overwhelming strength, her attack had sent that cleric flying. However, the cleric took the opportunity to put some distance between them. Unfortunately, Fire Dance's damage only shattered the cleric's Truth Shield. The cleric remained unharmed. Just as Fire Dance thought of chasing after the cleric, she felt an intensely dense killing intent from behind her. Hurriedly, Fire Dance used Wind Step Stang. Without her notice, a dagger struck her back. Fortunately, Fire Dance had activated Wind Steps in time, the 1-second invulnerability nullifying the attack. Your reaction time is quite good, but how about this? The black-clothed assassin that suddenly appeared behind Fire Dance bantered. He then brandished 2 daggers, sending over a dozen afterimages at Fire Dance. It was as if he had launched these attacks simultaneously, entrapping Fire Dance instinctually. Fire Dance had wanted to defend against the attacks. However, she quickly changed her mind and used Void Steps instead. Suddenly, Fire Dance vanished. The black-clothed assassin halted his attacks and activated Wind Step Stang. Fire Dance suddenly appeared beside the black-clothed assassin, her short sword stopping just before the man's back, unable to proceed even an inch. Such an amazing footwork. It seems that I did not choose the wrong target, the black-clothed assassin laughed. He glanced at Fire Dance, saying, "I'm Pleiades, the one who is going to kill you. A flowing water realm expert?" When Fire Dance saw her opponent's calm reaction to Void Steps, she could roughly guess Pleiades' standard. Otherwise, he would not have been able to defend. Only those capable of predicting her movements could defend against her Void Steps. Aside from Fire Dance, who had encountered a flowing water realm expert, Violet Cloud faced down one of the Flower of Seven Sins party leaders. Although Zero Wings members had the advantage in attributes and could take the initiative in attacking, the assassins' techniques were far more refined. The assassins did not use strictly might to face their opponents. Instead, they defended and counterattacked. After all, with the presence of the lava domain, Zero Wings members would continuously lose HP over time. On the other hand, the 9-star polar domain still suppressed the Flower of Seven Sins assassins. Damn it. Sky actually died so quickly. Pleiades frowned as he turned to Fire Dance, whose attributes had been restored. He lost his prior composure initially. Fire Dance already had higher attributes than he did. He had only kept up with Fire Dance's attacks by relying on his accurate judgment. Now that Fire Dance had recovered her attributes while he was still hampered, dodging and blocking the woman's attacks became far more difficult. Whether it was Pleiades or the other members of the Flower of Seven Sins, they all had grimaced as they fought. Didn't you enjoy beating me up just now? Shadow Sword, who had less than half of his HP remaining, said as he smirked at a Refinement Realm level 34 Guardian Knight. His lips curling into a smile, Shadow Sword said, "It's my turn now." Saying so, Shadow Sword swung the blue fire double-edged sword violently and executed Whirlwind Slash. He was not the slightest bit afraid of revealing any weak points against absolute strength and speed, despite the level 34 Guardian Knight using his shield to defend against Shadow Sword's Whirlwind Slash. The impact forced him to retreat 6 steps, a damage of over -800 points appearing above his head. For a second there, he had nearly lost his balance. Shadow Sword immediately followed up with a series of violent slashes facing Shadow Sword's rapid barrage. The Guardian Knight had no choice but to raise his shield and defend himself. However, every time Shadow Sword struck his shield, he received over -200 damage, his body forced to retreat one step after another. He had no chances to counterattack on Violet Cloud's side. The Astromancer was finally able to apply leverage. Activating Star's guidance, she sent the level 34 Berserker party leader, who chased after her, flying. Immediately after, she attacked with her mana balls. 30 mana balls appeared in the air around them. Although this attack was not as strong as the 36 mana balls she could summon after drinking the 100-berry wine, Violet Cloud was able to control the 30 mana balls with much greater precision. Moreover, due to her recovered attributes, the force her mana balls contained had also increased significantly. The Berserker party leader required his full might to block every mana ball. Otherwise, the balls would knock him back and reveal even more weak points. However, against the overwhelming power of the 30 mana balls, the Berserker party leader occasionally missed 2 or 3 mana balls, receiving around -500 to -600 damage without the suppression of Zero Wing's attributes. The battle immediately turned to Zero Wing's favor. Whereas the Flower of Seven Sins were at a complete disadvantage after killing Sky, Shifeng did not stop to pick up the loot the Berserker had dropped. Instead, he turned around and dashed for the Seven Sins party leader that posed the greatest threat to Zero Wing. These party leaders were all experts in the Flowing Water realm. Even if Zero Wing's main force members recovered their attributes, the party leaders were still a major threat. After Shifeng's attributes recovered, due to Thunder God's descent still being active, he became much faster. Although he was not as fast as when he had killed Sky, his speed was more than enough to deal with the Seven Sins party leaders. After appearing behind one of the party leaders, Shifeng executed Chop with his killing Raya. Streak of blue light flashed. 15 for 85. A bloody mark appeared on the Shield Warrior party leader. Only at this moment did the Shield Warrior's shield appear in Shifeng's trajectory. The Shield Warrior was slower than Shifeng's by a massive margin. Suddenly, the party leader, who had roughly 11,000 HP remaining, fell to the ground. Observers were, once again, rendered speechless. Shifeng's attack was simply too fast. Watching from afar, they had only seen a flash of blue light. They had not even seen his sword's afterimage before it struck his opponent. Just how was someone supposed to defend against such an attack? After just a short moment, 4 of the 7 Flower of Seven Sins party leaders had died at Shifeng's hands. Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, and Aqua Rose took care of the last 3. In the end, Zero Wing had annihilated the assassins from the Flower of Seven Sins. Chapter 744, Star Alliance's Defeat. As the Flower of Seven Sins came to an end, everyone watching from afar was dumbfounded. It was especially true for the Star Alliance's upper echelons. People in their position were very aware of how terrifying the Flower of Seven Sins was. The Flower of Seven Sins was an organization that had killed the upper echelons of super guilds countless times, invoking the super guild's wrath. However, none of those guilds could do anything to the assassin organization until this day. The Flower of Seven Sins had never failed a job. Yet, now, this legend shattered. The most incredulous aspect was that it had been an upstart guild that broke the legend. How can this be? Red Feather's eyes widened, and he clenched his fists as he stared at the corpses of the Seven Sins scattered across the ground. The Flower of Seven Sins had been their final trump card against Zero Wing. Now that the assassins had been wiped out, how were they supposed to deal with Zero Wing's upper echelons? Any expert could take advantage of the narrow terrain to exert their strength, not to mention Black Flame, who could instant kill the Flower of Seven Sins team leader. With Black Flame's strength, he could slaughter elite players without wasting much stamina. He only needed one hit for each kill. If they relied on Zerg tactics to kill Black Flame, just how many elite players would they need to sacrifice? Not to mention, the Tier 3 demon was still alive and kicking. It was practically impossible to annihilate Zero Wing's main force here with just 20,000 elite players. Guild leader, the Flower of Seven Sins members have been wiped out. What should we do now? Unsure himself, Red Feather quickly decided to report to Galaxy Past. What? Galaxy Past was momentarily stunned when he received the news. For a second, he even thought Red Feather was joking. However, Red Feather would never joke so distastefully in such a dire situation like this. His expression turning serious, Galaxy Past asked, "How many people does Zero Wing have left? Is Black Flame dead?" The Flower of Seven Sins' strength was absolute. Even if Zero Wing's main force were impressive, they would not walk away unharmed. If Zero Wing's main force had suffered severe casualties, then they could rely on their elite army to swarm their remaining enemies. Without any commanders, Zero Wing's army would into disarray and morale would drop sharply. It would be significantly easier to take out Zero Wing's elite army without its leaders. They have 76 people remaining. Black Flame is still alive, Red Feather hurriedly reported after glancing at Zero Wing's members, who were still within the magic array. Galaxy Past surprise escalated. Are you sure? Galaxy Past asked once more. The Flower of Seven Sins had dispatched 50 of its top-tier assassins. Every one of these assassins was an expert that struck fear into one's heart. Even Galaxy Past himself was not sure that he could escape should any one of these experts come for his life. How was it possible that this team of assassins had only claimed slightly over 20 Zero Wing lives? Galaxy Past had a very clear understanding of the strength of Zero Wing's main force. Aside from the few, very strong upper echelons, most of them were subpar. Galaxy Past was even confident he could face several of them at once. Guild leader, how could I mistake something like this? For a time, even Red Feather was at a loss. Hurriedly, he said, all of Zero Wing's upper echelons are still alive. Only a few core members died. That Tier 3 demon has also broken out of its magical imprisonment and has begun to attack our people. When Galaxy Past heard this, his brain stopped functioning. Since when was Zero Wing so powerful? Against the Flower of Seven Sins' 50-man assassin team, Zero Wing had actually emerged victorious, losing only a few unimportant members. Guild leader, what should we do now? Do we fight or retreat? Red Feather asked anxiously as he watched the Tier 3 demon slaughter his elite members. Black Flame, we will retreat. Only after a long moment did Galaxy Past finally decide. When he uttered the word retreat, he sounded as if he had been sapped of all of his energy. How many years had it been? Galaxy Past had long since forgotten the feeling of defeat. However, today, he had been reminded of the taste. This taste made him very uncomfortable. Ever since the Star Alliance had fallen into his control, the guild had only lost to super guilds and super first-rate guilds. The Star Alliance had never lost to anything less yet. Now, the Star Alliance he commanded had been beaten into submission by an upstart guild. This blow was many times more humiliating than suffering defeat at the hands of those super guilds. A Tier 3 demon was the equivalent of a great lord. Galaxy Past knew the strength of a great lord quite well. Otherwise, he would not have paid such a large price to purchase a Tier 3 summoning scroll from a super guild. At this stage of a game, having a great lord on one side could reduce one's losses significantly while dealing a devastating blow to the enemy. With 2 Tier 3 summoning scrolls, they thought they had this war in the bag. However, Galaxy Past had never imagined that an energy pulse attack would eliminate both of their great lords. They had no way to deal with a Tier 3 demon. If they did not retreat, they would only suffer more casualties. After Red Feather heard Galaxy Past's command, his downcast expression became even more gloomy. However, he still gave the order to retreat. Meanwhile, standing on a nearby mountaintop, the secret pavilion members were engaged in a heated discussion over this war between the Star Alliance and Zero Wing. Guild leader Black Flame is too powerful. The way he killed that team leader from the Flower of Seven Sins was just too cool. I wonder what sort of training Black Flame used to get to his level. Even after watching the battle so many times, I only caught a glimpse of Black Flame's figure. I couldn't even see the afterimage of his attack. Uncle Yuan would most likely last only a few moves against Black Flame. What do you even know? Uncle Yuan is powerful. Of course, he could block Black Flame's attack. But Black Flame's attack speed is so high. Who could possibly defend against his attack? Among the Secret Pavilion's trainees, many had renewed their impressions of Zero Wing. They were no longer arrogant when talking about Zero Wing. Unconsciously, they had gone from calling the swordsman Black Flame to calling him Guild Leader Black Flame. However, a few youths among them were still unsatisfied. There is no need to argue. I am not a match for Black Flame. Or to put it in another way, only those few, monstrous players can contend with Black Flame now, Yuan Tiexian said suddenly. He could not help but laugh at everyone's conversation. Autumn, what did you think of this fight? Yuan Tiexian asked the silent Cold Autumn. Cold Autumn was the top genius among the Secret Pavilion's new generation. The youth had joined the Secret Pavilion's secret training program a year ago. He was only 17 years old, yet he had already become the pavilion's star pupil. He had already reached the half-step refinement realm and was only a thread away from truly entering the refinement realm. He could break through at any time. Initially, Yuan Tiexian had brought Cold Autumn and the other trainees here to teach them not to be too arrogant, showing them that there were many experts in the virtual gaming world. He had also wanted to show them a true monster. Unfortunately, Silver had not made an appearance this time. However, their gains from watching the battle between Sky and Black Flame should be sufficient. Yuan Tiexian had even hoped to see a confrontation between Black Flame and Silver. Just what kind of outcome would such a battle yield? Black Flame is very strong. With my current strength, I am no match for him, the prideful Cold Autumn admitted softly. However, I will continue to work hard. Sooner or later, I will surpass him. Ha ha ha. That's right. This is the sort of mindset you must possess. It seems that this trip here has not been a waste at all. Yuan Tiexian nodded with satisfaction. Suddenly, he heard the ring of his communicator, surprising him. After all, this was a call from none other than the Secret Pavilion's guild leader. Chapter 745, Eternally Remembered Strike. After Red Feather gave the order, the elite army the Star Alliance had sent to deal with Zero Wing's main force retreated, leaving behind only a small squadron to deal with the battle demon. The elite legions of the Star Alliance and the various large guilds, which fought elsewhere on the battlefield, also began to retreat, preparing to leave the Stoneclaw Mountains. It's too late to retreat now. Shifeng sneered as he swept his gaze across the fleeing Star Alliance army. Immediately, he sent a command through the guild chat, saying, all elite legions, activate the 9-star polar domain magic array. There was why Shifeng had previously split Zero Wing's army into 10 separate elite legions. The Stoneclaw Mountains' outer region was vast. However, there were only 10 paths that led to the dungeon's teleportation array. As soon as the war began, Shifeng had used the guild war order to seal off the Stoneclaw Mountains. Any player within could not escape with a return scroll. The only way to leave the dungeon was by using the teleportation array. There were two methods of using magic arrays in God's domain. The first method used a magic array aggressively to suppress the enemy. The second use was defensive due to the unique characteristics of barrier magic arrays. Once these magic arrays were activated, enemies trapped inside the barrier could not leave. Similarly, nobody would be able to enter the barrier unless they destroyed the magic array itself. However, it was not easy to destroy a magic array. A lot of time was required to do so. Attacks from outside the array would be weakened. Normally, it was much easier to destroy a magic array from inside. The 9-star polar domain was no exception. Hence, Shifeng had sent Zero Wing's 10 elite legions to guard the 10 paths. When the elite legions activated their 9-star polar domain magic array, they would prevent the Star Alliance and other large guilds from leaving the Stoneclaw Mountains. They could then take the opportunity to gain more from this war. With Shifeng's command, the barrier parties mobilized, every one of them revealing the 9-star polar domain magic scroll they had held on to. All this to me as the 90 players unfurled the magic scrolls in their hands. 10 massive magic arrays suddenly appeared above the battlefield, enveloping a large portion of the battlefield and sealing all exits out of the Stoneclaw Mountains. What's going on? Why have my attributes decreased? Damn it! I don't even have 6,000 HP right now. The various guilds' elite members, who had forced Zero Wing's elite legions into a constant retreat, suddenly discovered something amiss. Their attributes had decreased by 40%. Their attacks could not cause any significant damage to Zero Wing's elite members at all. In contrast, Zero Wing's elite members, whose attributes remained unchanged, could finish them off with just a few hits. Suddenly, Zero Wing's enemies began to panic. Although the players caught outside the magic array tried to help and constantly attack the barrier with spells, the effect of their attacks were minimal. The magical class players maintaining the 9-star polar domain did not lose much mana from their attacks. It's our turn now. Seeing the various guilds panicking elites, Zero Wing's elite members rushed forward to resolve the battle. Originally, they had needed roughly 4 or 5 attacks to defeat their enemies. Now, they only needed 2 or 3 hits to do so. On the other hand, their enemies now required roughly 8 or 9 hits to kill them. The battle was one-sided. Moreover, the 9-star polar domain magic array was like a knife at their throats. The magic arrays had cut off their retreat. Aqua used the mana pulse cannon to support the legions. Everyone else, guard the cannon and clean up the battlefield. After Shifeng issued his commands, he activated Wind Rider and flew down the mountain. The 9-star polar domain would not hold the Star Alliance and its allies for long. The various large guilds would escape by the time the battle demon reached them. However, if he killed his enemy's commanders, the remaining elite players would run like a headless chicken. He would significantly reduce the elite army's momentum, earning more time for his army. Someone's flying towards us, the retreating Star Alliance members suddenly shouted as they glanced towards the sky. Everyone turned to see the flying figure Black Flame. It's Black Flame. As the figure approached, the elites recognized Zero Wing's guild leader charging at us alone? Do you really think the Star Alliance is that easy to bully? Red Feather also noticed Shifeng rapidly approached their army. He bellowed, "Ranged players, shoot him down. Anyone who kills Black Flame will be rewarded with a set of top-tier equipment, 500 gold, and a promotion to core member." A first-rate guild had many members. However, only a few could become core members. Without extremely powerful combat skills, becoming one of the guild's elites was generally their limit. Meanwhile, there was a qualitative difference between the treatment an elite member received and what the core members enjoyed. Not only did core members have priority on good equipment, but they also received a bountiful salary each month. One could earn far more credits as a core member than they could as at an office job in a large corporation. One could say that core members were considered formal internal staff in a first-rate guild while an elite was merely external staff. The benefits were on a completely different level. Black Flame, die. The Star Alliance's elites shouted excitedly. Thousands of ranged players began casting their spells and knocking their arrows as they awaited Shifeng's arrival. As Shifeng grew closer to the elite army, spells and arrows began to fly towards him. However, with Wind Rider's speed increase, Shifeng had little trouble evading the spells and arrows. Moreover, as these elite players launched their attacks based on their predictions of Shifeng's movement, he only needed to fly out of range to avoid the attacks. Like this, Shifeng advanced effortlessly, weaving his way through the rain of spells and arrows from afar. It seemed as if Shifeng danced amidst the countless spells and arrows. As a result of his frightening speed, Shifeng left behind one afterimage after another, confusing the Star Alliance's elites. None of them could follow Shifeng's movement. Seeing Shifeng approach, instead of being affected by Shifeng's frightening momentum, Red Feather sneered as he took out a crimson Tier 2 magic scroll from his bag. Black Flame. You're the one who will die today. Red Feather acknowledged that none of his own spells would land on the fast-moving Shifeng. However, the Tier 2 magic scroll he held was a different story. Tier 2 spell, Holy Spears of Flame. Suddenly, 36 flame spears appeared around Red Feather, the scorching fire increasing the surrounding temperature. Black Flame turned to ash. Red Feather waved his staff when he saw that there were only 30 yards left between him and Shifeng. The 36 flame spears transformed into streams of light as they shot toward Shifeng. The flame spears were much faster than Shifeng, taking only an instant to cross the 30 yards. The flame spears blocked any path of escape, giving Shifeng no room to dodge. Meanwhile, the Holy Spears of Flame was an unblockable sacred spell. Every spear rivaled a Lord-ranked monster's power. It was an extremely powerful spell. Just as the spears were about to strike Shifeng, he suddenly disappeared. None of the flame spears hit their mark. Before Red Feather could react, he discovered Shifeng in front of him. Blue arcs of electricity circled Shifeng's body, crackling as they sparked Tier 2 taboo skill, Instant Strike. Shifeng's figure dashed past Red Feather, leaving behind a blue afterimage that remained for a relatively long time. Red Feather fell to the ground, his body lying motionless. His HP, which had been over 8,000, dropped to nothing. Meanwhile, Shifeng's figure had long since departed, leaving the Star Alliance elites in a daze. They would carry this scene forever in their minds while thousands of players bombarded him with attacks. Shifeng had managed to kill Red Feather with one hit. All they could do was stare at Shifeng's back as he departed. Chapter 746, Breaking Through Flowing Water. The retreating elite members weren't the only ones who saw Shifeng kill Red Feather. The secret pavilion members, who had been preparing to depart from the battlefield, also saw the attack with a flash of blue light. The battle had been over. No one from the secret pavilion understood what had just happened. Despite the thousands of elite players and Red Feather's Tier 2 magic scroll, Shifeng had killed Red Feather instantly and left without so much as a scratch. It was simply inconceivable. Shifeng's attack was even faster than the one he had used to kill Sky. Who could possibly contend with that kind of speed? Black Flame was still hiding his strength when he faced Sky. Yuan Tiexin was shocked. As for the secret pavilion's trainees, everyone was speechless, chills crawling down their spines. Ordinary elite members might not have caught the crucial moment of the fight, but they had seen it. Rather than his dodging capabilities, the speed of Black Flame's attack had been truly frightening. They had only seen Black Flame brush past Red Feather. None of them had seen Black Flame's sword leave its sheath. They stood too far away, so they had not been able to see the attack too clearly. However, Red Feather had taken the hit personally. He should have seen Black Flame's technique clearly. Moreover, due to God's domain, both ordinary players and experts' sharp intuition had improved significantly in the moment of death. This wildlike intuition could allow them to evade attacks. Expert players, in particular, had an easier time and a higher chance to evade. Red Feather was an expert ranked on the God's Domain experts list, which the secret pavilion published. His strength was extraordinary. Although he had yet to reach the half-step refinement realm, he possessed bountiful combat experience with very high basic attributes to back it up. His ability to respond to danger was first-class among experts. Even Cold Autumn, a genius proclaimed by the secret pavilion, might not be as good as Red Feather in this aspect yet. An expert with such fast reactions had not reacted in the least when Black Flame had attacked him. It was as if Red Feather's intuition had vanished during that moment. Only when he had died did he realize that he had been struck. This was the cause behind the secret pavilion members' shudders. Although the attack speed Black Flame displayed when he faced Sky had been astounding, their eyes had only failed to keep up with Black Flame's sword. Now, however, they had not even realized when Black Flame had attacked. They had only seen the streak of rapidly dissipating blue light. Meanwhile, Shifeng, who had already pulled away from the elite army, was not particularly satisfied with his performance. Sure enough, it won't be easy to replicate that sensation again. After killing Red Feather, Shifeng recalled the move he used to kill Sky. The principle behind one spear, 6 transformations was similar to his void steps. One spear, 6 transformations was a technique that used special attack methods to overload the opponent's brain with complex information, causing their brain to ignore this information, not allowing them to perceive the attack. Only when the spear truly threatened their life would their brain dispel this ignorance. However, at that point, the spears were already under their noses, and it was too late to react. Even with his advantage of attributes, Shifeng could barely block 2 or 3 spear images. It was practically impossible to block all 6. Shifeng was only able to employ such a technique with his body. However, Sky could employ the technique on his attacks. It was astounding. The body's movement speed was far inferior to its attack speed. Hence, it was exponentially more difficult to employ such a technique with one's attacks. Moreover, for this kind of technique, the faster it was, the more difficult the technique was to use. One was required to carry out a series of complex motions within an extremely short period to execute the technique. Only with overly complex information would the brain refuse to accept the image, choosing to ignore it. As someone who had a profound understanding of this technique, Shifeng had no choice but to close his eyes and shut out all visual information. Instead, he chose to rely on his other sensory organs, his wealth of combat experience, and his sharp intuition to dodge Sky's one spear, 6 transformations. With his absolute advantage regarding attributes, it was possible if he maintained a distance of roughly 1 yard away from Sky's attack range and evaded the instant he sensed the Berserker's spear displace the air around him, he would have sufficient time to dodge the incoming attacks. This was precisely the reason that Shifeng had avoided Sky's aggressive attacks while launching his own counterattack in a battle between experts. It was extremely dangerous to shut out one's visual sense because, among a person's 5 senses, one's sight absorbed the most information. Ordinary players relied on sight the most. If a player lost their sight, they would be crippled, wounding their combat power. However, while Shifeng had closed his eyes and evaded Sky's one spear, 6 transformations, he discovered that his perception of the world had changed without his sight. His concentration had focused on his surroundings. He no longer focused on his enemy. When he faced the threat of death, he discovered that his perception had become much clearer than before. Although he had not been able to see Sky's movements, he had sensed the spear's position, which allowed him to have an increasingly easy time to dodge the Berserker's attacks. Finally, when Sky executed one spear, 9 kills, Shifeng realized what the Void Realm actually was at that moment. It was as if his environment were a part of his body. It felt like the martial arts concept of harmony between man and nature. At that moment, Sky's spear ceased to confuse him. In the end, Shifeng had opened the last door of the realms of refinement, Void Realm. After reaching the Void Realm, Shifeng could see the general attack range of one spear, 9 kills with a single glance. Hence, Shifeng brandished Killing Ray to block every single strike. If comparing attack speed, Shifeng, who had activated Thunder God's Descent, could not lose. However, when Shifeng landed the final strike against Sky, he noticed a crack in space. He unconsciously swung Killing Ray along that space. By the time he was aware of what was happening, Sky was already on the ground when he had killed Red Feather. However, he had not been able to relive that sensation. Only, the bonus speed that instant strike provided was simply astonishing, so much so that Red Feather could not react to his attack. Hence, Shifeng was somewhat dissatisfied with this result. After Shifeng killed Red Feather's elite army fell into a turmoil. None of the elites knew what to do. Moreover, after watching Shifeng's performance, many of them were scared witless as they scattered. If killing Red Feather generated such a result, Shifeng could not let the other Legion commanders off the hook. On top of his own battles, Shifeng directed the Battle Demon to kill the Star Alliance and their allies' commanders. Very quickly, chaos broke out on the battlefield. Damn that black flame! He is trying to wipe us out. After receiving the reports from the Star Alliance's various elite legions, even if Galaxy Past were a fool, he understood Shifeng's goal. He then looked at the map of the Stoneclaw Mountains and said through the guild chat, "Everyone, gather at the northwest mountain path. We'll break through as one." With mayhem overwhelming the battlefield, breaking through multiple exits would be too time-consuming. They would only play into Shifeng's hands if they did so. Hence, Galaxy Past chose to gather the Star Alliance's army at the nearest exit path, focusing their power into a single point. With this, they could smash through Zero Wing's defense. A moment later, under Galaxy Past's command, the Star Alliance's elite army gathered at the northwest mountain path and began to attack the 9-star polar domain madly. Despite Zero Wing's elite members retaliating, the effect was minimal. The 9 players maintaining the magic array lost their mana rapidly. After a few minutes, the 9-star polar domain shattered. The Star Alliance members rejoiced. Huh? Isn't that black flame? It's not just black flame. Isn't that fire dance and aqua rose beside him? Chapter 749, Wargod Possession. Galaxy Past finally can't endure it. Xianxia could not help but smile as he watched Galaxy Past, who rushed at Shifeng. Although it was impossible for Shifeng to wipe out the Star Alliance's army, even if Galaxy Past let the Swordsman be, doing so would wound the Alliance's morale severely. If Galaxy Past did not stop Shifeng's unrestrained slaughter, the elite members' opinions of their guild might hit rock bottom when Ouroboros's army arrived. The Star Alliance would truly be finished. However, with this opportunity, Xianxia would finally see Shifeng's limits. During the battles against Sky and Red Feather, Shifeng had shown rapid improvements to his combat power. Initially, Xianxia merely thought that Shifeng's stunning performances against Sky and Red Feather were a result of his overwhelming attributes. However, after seeing Shifeng last so long while surrounded by elites, yet not receiving any damage, this was no longer a matter of superior attributes. Without stepping into the Void Realm, which allowed one to perceive one's environment as if it were a part of their own body, it was impossible to dodge so many spell and arrow attacks coming from behind accurately. Xianxia suddenly realized something that made his skin crawl. The secret pavilion had collected plenty of information regarding Zero Wings guild leader, Black Flame. Xianxia himself had read the reports on Black Flame multiple times. In the beginning, Black Flame had gained his fame in Star Moon Kingdom through his identity as a forger, earning himself the title of Star Moon Kingdom's chief forger. However, as Black Flame began to appear in battle, everything had changed. Black Flame had relied on absolute strength to defeat his enemies. Through his achievement of killing his enemies with a single hit, he had gained the title of One-Hit Asura. However, Black Flame's performance had been a result of his excellent equipment and very high basic attributes. As for his combat standards, he was merely a top-tier expert in the eyes of the general public. He had not even been a match for Cold Autumn when it came to combat standards. He was only someone with a wealth of combat experience. He could not hold the attention of the major powers in God's domain yet. As he participated in more battles, Black Flame's combat standard surprised the public again and again. He had gone from half-step refinement realm to reaching the refinement realm fully, then entering the flowing water realm as well. As his battle count increased, Black Flame's abilities increased. Now, he had reached the Void Realm. Xianxia refused to believe that Black Flame's battles had just been acts. Moreover, experts who had set foot into the realms of refinement had their own pride. They would not suppress their strength to deal with a weakling. There was no point to that since it wasn't an act. Xianxia could only think of one possibility. Zero Wings guild leader, Black Flame, had improved with an intensely terrifying speed. Compared to the horror of Black Flame's basic attributes, his growth was what truly frightened people. The secret pavilion considered Cold Autumn a genius because he was young. In addition, despite training with the pavilion for less than a year, he had already reached the half-step refinement realm and could break through to the refinement realm at any moment. Cold Autumn's growth was even faster than Xianxia's when he had been young. But what about Black Flame? How long had it been since God's domain launched? In less than 2 months, Black Flame had gone from someone who was not even a half-step refinement realm expert to a true Void Realm expert. Was he even still human? Even Martial Dragon, someone whom the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had considered a genius that only appeared once every 10 years, would not be a match for Black Flame in the future. Black Flame might very well become one of the virtual gaming world's monsters. With that in mind, Xianxia decided that, even if Zero Wing suffered defeat in this war, he would offer to aid Zero Wing in securing Stone Forest Town, taking the opportunity to get associated with the Guild God's domain, as a virtual reality game, was massive. It was different from the virtual reality games they had seen in the past. Even a super guild should not consider the idea of monopolizing the game. Moreover, the waters of the virtual gaming world were relatively deep. Now that various major international corporations had put a foot in as well, the virtual gaming world had become far more complicated. If the secret pavilion could gain a powerful ally like Zero Wing, it would benefit the pavilion's development in the future. The pavilion could seize more opportunities and gain a stronger influence. Just as Xianxia plotted to strengthen the relationship between the secret pavilion and Zero Wing, over 100 figures approached Shifeng with astonishing speed. I'll hold his attention. Find an opportunity to attack. Galaxy Past commanded through the team chat as he approached Shifeng. He then retrieved a deep blue potion from his bag. Shifeng might be able to fight with relative ease while surrounded by elite players, but it would be a different story if he were surrounded by expert players. It was extremely difficult for elite players to push their virtual bodies to their limits. However, this was not an issue for experts. They could do so easily naturally. Shifeng had no trouble with elite players if he fought with everything he had. However, it was a vastly different story against experts who also pushed themselves to their limits. Black Flame, I'll teach you that a first-rate guild is not easy to deal with. Galaxy Past shouted. He then dumped the deep blue potion down his throat. At the same time, he activated his Berserk skill, Wargod Possession. Suddenly, not only did his body grow a size larger, but it also released a brilliant golden glow. His aura was even stronger than a Lord-ranked monster, and this sudden change sent a ripple of shock through the Star Alliance's army. Since the various guilds had learned of Zero Wing's Berserk skills, they had spared no effort to collect their own. Galaxy Past had even mobilized the entire guild strength and lost several thousand elite players to obtain Wargod Possession. The Berserk skill that all Berserkers dreamed of having. Wargod Possession was a Tier 1 taboo skill. Its effects could even rival an ordinary Tier 2 Berserk skill. Moreover, the skill was very well suited for the Berserker class. Upon activation, it instantly increased the user's strength by 150%, all other attributes by 80%, and defense by 200%. Moreover, the less HP the user had, the higher the strength bonus the user received. The only shortcoming the skill had was its short duration of 20 seconds. Once those 20 seconds passed, the user would enter a weakened state for 1 hour. The skill also had a 24-hour cooldown. It was a forbidden skill that should only be used during the most crucial moments. However, to deal with Shifeng, who possessed frightening attributes, Galaxy Past had no choice but to activate this Berserk skill. As insurance, Galaxy Past drank an extreme speed potion, a rare, high-level potion that he had obtained from a quest. The potion increased movement speed by 100% and attack speed by 150% for 30 seconds with a cooldown of 1 hour. With the effects of Wargod Possession and the extreme speed potion, it was not entirely impossible to kill Shifeng. Moreover, not long ago, Shifeng had used his own Berserk skill. Berserk skills generally had very long cooldowns. Only a short time had elapsed since Shifeng had last used his. It was impossible for his Berserk skill to have cooled down already. Without a Berserk skill, even if Shifeng's attributes were more powerful, he was not a match for Galaxy Past, who had activated a Tier 1 taboo skill. Black Flame. It's time you know what it feels like to have your attributes overwhelmed. Galaxy Past activated Charge and appeared before Shifeng like a ghost. With a malevolent smile, he swung down his dark gold-ranked great sword, Weeping Silver, violently boom. When Weeping Silver descended, an explosion shook the area. The ground beneath Shifeng's feet shattered, revealing long sword marks. A level 32 shield warrior, who had accidentally collided with the sword aura, lost his life instantly. Galaxy Past's horrific power caused everyone to shudder. Chapter 750, Berserk. Galaxy Past's performance shocked every player who saw it. Nobody had ever imagined that Galaxy Past was so powerful. Not only was his strength unmatched, but he was also so fast that people only caught a glimpse of him as he moved. Despite using Violent Strike, one of the most common Berserker skills, he displayed more power than an AoE attack skill. Even a lord of the same level would pale in the face of such destructive power. Black Flame is done for sure this time. This scene cleared away the Star Alliance's defeated mood as expected of the Star Alliance's guild leader. He actually hid such a card so well. Glorious Echo was also impressed. Although he had his own trump card, it was slightly inferior to Galaxy Past's. With such strength and speed, even if Black Flame had not died from the sudden blow, he would be heavily injured. The 100 or so expert players stilled their footsteps, thinking that the battle had ended, that their help was no longer needed. When the dust settled, however, a man, wearing a black cloak and wielding an emerald longsword, stood before Galaxy Past. Unharmed, he blocked it. How? Everyone's jaws nearly fell to the ground. Shifeng had actually blocked Galaxy Past's attack, which had been stronger than a lord's. Everyone had thought that Shifeng might evade the attack, but never had they thought Shifeng would block it with his sword. Moreover, Shifeng was still unscathed. Only the ground beneath his feet had fragmented, the cracks spreading out across 5 yards in every direction. From the state of the ground, they knew how heavy Galaxy Past's violent strike had been such immense strength. Shifeng felt his hand, which held on to Killing Ray, go numb. Although he had sensed Galaxy Past charge at him, he had not expected the Berserker's strength and speed to increase by so much. With that kind of speed, it had been too late to dodge. If not for his perception of his environment having sharpened, he would not have executed parry in time to block Galaxy Past's attack. Parry was considered one of a swordsman's life-saving skills. It could neutralize one instance of damage coming from ahead of the user. However, the user would not be exempt from the impact. If Galaxy Past's attack had struck Shifeng's body, even with his high defense and his HP being over 14,500, he would not have died, but he wouldn't have had much HP left either. I want to see just how many life-saving skills you possess. Seeing that his surprise attack had failed, Galaxy Past swung Weeping Silver and executed Horizontal Slash. Not only did Horizontal Slash have a larger attack range than Violent Strike, but it was also significantly faster. With the boost from the Extreme Speed Potion, Weeping Silver transformed into a streak of silver light as it shot toward Shifeng. Galaxy Past completely disregarded his own safety, revealing all sorts of weak points as he attacked. He was fully intent on trading Shifeng a hit for a hit. In response, Shifeng used silent steps and avoided the devouring white light. Reappearing behind Galaxy Past, he swung Killing Ray down on the Berserker while using a skill. Players were highly susceptible to revealing weak points if they were not adept with a skill's movements. Galaxy Past experienced this for himself, transforming into a streak of electric blue light. Killing Ray descended with frightening speed. Even if Galaxy Past had wanted to block the attack, it was too late. However, as if he had expected this, Galaxy Past immediately executed Whirlwind Slash, spinning with his great sword. He ignored the blue light descending towards him, fully intent on trading damage for damage. In terms of strength, Galaxy Past had an absolute advantage. Hence, if they traded blows, Galaxy Past would come out victorious. Shifeng had no intentions of granting Galaxy Past's wish. With a thought, he activated Defensive Blade Boom. The blue light slammed into Galaxy Past's body, stealing over 2,300 of the Berserker's HP. When the two level 200 red paladins heard this, they immediately retrieved their spears and opened the doors, allowing Shifeng entry. Chapter 756, Fief. Compared to Shifeng's previous visit, a new, large collection of ancient books filled the Star Moon Hall. Some of these books even radiated mana that could rival Tier 4 magic scrolls. Tier 4 magic scrolls were almost as rare as legendary items in God's domain. Tier 4 magic scrolls had survived since the ancient era. Shi Feng had yet to hear of anyone who could produce Tier 4 magic scrolls. If a book could exude so much mana that it rivaled a Tier 4 magic scroll, one could easily tell that these books were extraordinary. Meanwhile, Charlene, who sat high above the hall, had also changed significantly. Although her level, statistics, and clothing had not undergone any transformations, the pressure she gave off had changed tremendously. She did not have the usual, oppressive aura of a powerhouse. Instead, she felt like the all-encompassing sky. Her presence could be felt from anywhere within the room. Before Shi Feng had approached Charlene, he felt his mind clear far more than ever before. He also noticed that the endless streams of mana in the room were actually moving towards Charlene. It was as if Charlene were God's domain's heart. How could this be possible? Shi Feng was shocked when he arrived before Charlene. Shi Feng had discovered something that shook him to the core. After reaching the Void Realm, he felt his environment as clearly as the palm of his hand. He could sense everything within a fixed radius of himself to an astonishingly accurate degree. Previously, as Charlene had still been outside his range, he had not thought much about not noticing Charlene's energy. Yet, despite standing so close to the woman, he couldn't feel her at all. Before, the two Tier 3 paladins had clearly been able to feel her presence. Shi Feng doubted that his sense had failed him. Has something happened that has led you to find me so urgently? Charlene, who had been reading a book, asked with great interest as her beautiful eyes turned towards Shi Feng. Lady Charlene, I've collected the immortal souls you requested. Shi Feng displayed the spirit seal imprinted on the back of his right hand. Immortal souls filled the seal to the brim. Good job. With this many immortal souls, I'll be able to repair the immortal crown quickly. Charlene nodded and tapped her finger in the air. Suddenly, golden divine runes began circling Shi Feng's right hand. Countless golden threads flowed out of the spirit seal, gathering into a ball before flying into Charlene's hand. Since you have completed your quest, I will fulfill my promise as well. Here, this is for you. Charlene waved her hand. In the next moment, a leaf of lambskin parchment appeared in her hand. The parchment then flew towards Shi Feng. The lambskin parchment looked quite ordinary. However, the words on the parchment could tempt any guild in God's domain. Star Moon Kingdom's city building order. As long as it was within Star Moon Kingdom's jurisdiction, one could construct their own city with this city building order. To a guild, even a legendary item was not worth as much as this single piece of parchment. Cities were different from towns. In God's domain, cities could be built, whereas towns could not. Meanwhile, captured towns' locations were fixed, but built cities could be chosen casually. One could even build a city in the middle of monsters' territory. A town's maximum population usually ranged between 30,000 to 50,000. On the other hand, even the smallest city could hold 200,000 players. This was why, after obtaining their own towns, guilds would focus all of their efforts on developing the town in the hopes of promoting it into a city as soon as possible. Moreover, as a city demanded a sufficiently large plot of land, one could construct a mana tower in the city. With the mana tower, any player residing in the city would enjoy increased stamina and concentration recovery rates. They could even accumulate the double EXP buff. Chapter 759, Harvest of the War. Shi Feng could not help his bitter smile as he heard the NPC receptionist's words. Sure enough, it isn't that easy to establish a city. Shi Feng had thought it strange that Charlene had so kind-heartedly given him a city-building order in exchange for only 10,000 immortal souls. This reward was much too extravagant for an epic quest. Sure enough, there is another test to this god's domain was currently still in its early stages. Even a first-rate guild would have to spend a relatively long time just to collect several thousand gold. After all, for a guild to develop, expand, and improve itself, it would have to spend an exorbitant amount of money. Normally, having even 1,000 gold lying around was considered a luxury for a first-rate guild. Only Zero Wing, which had the Candlelight trading firm, Stone Forest Town, and a large number of guild quests, had a daily income of several thousand gold. However, after expanding the guild, they had a wider variety of expenditures. After deducting operating costs and salaries, Zero Wing raked in a clean profit of roughly 1,000 gold each day. After a month, the guild would make around 30,000 gold. The other guilds could only dream of such wealth. However, Shi Feng understood that, in reality, he was still just a poor bastard. This was only a fraction of what he needed to establish his city. The basic construction fee alone cost 120,000 gold. After including the cost of dealing with monster attacks, it was practically impossible for him to earn what he needed to construct the city. He also had to think of the necessary building construction that he would need after the city itself was complete. Shi Feng thought back to when Shadow had constructed a mana tower in its first city. The mana tower's required raw materials had cost close to 10,000 gold. The guild had also hired a bunch of NPCs to deal with the construction. Overall, the mana tower had cost Shadow 35,000 gold. The black market, on the other hand, had been somewhat cheaper. Even so, its construction still cost over 20,000 gold. If one added all the costs together, they would discover that the initial construction fee was only the first step to constructing a city. Even so, a large guild would willingly sacrifice everything it had, seeking sponsors and selling small portions of the guild's shares, to build a functioning city. Once the city was built, however, it would be a money magnet. In the past, to construct its first city, Shadow had sought out over a dozen sponsors. It was also then that Shadow split its shares between many financial groups and corporations. If Zero Wing did not wish to rely on external powers to construct a guild city, then it needed to earn a lot more money. When Shi Feng thought about the need to multiply his current income by several times, he felt his head throb. When Shadow had constructed its first city, there were far more people playing God's domain, and it had been much easier to earn money. Currently, the majority of the players in God's domain had yet to reach level 30. Hence, the challenge of earning more than 100,000 gold was significantly more difficult than it had been. Moreover, the Candlelight trading firm's daily income was nearly at its max. It would be very difficult to increase ETAs for Stone Forest Town. The town's income mainly came in the form of magic crystals. Moreover, it was also impossible to increase the town's income within a short time. As for the income from guild quests, it could not even begin to compete with the income of the Candlelight trading firm and Stone Forest Town. It seems I'll have to look for a new source. Shi Feng began to consider the matter. Currently, the most profitable trade involved selling top-tier weapons and equipment. Consumables were the next most profitable items. Zero Wing did not even have enough top-tier weapons and equipment to equip all of its members, so how could it possibly afford to part with those items? Only, the current Celiora was no longer the Celiora Shi Feng had known in the past. Instead, she was now a Grandmaster forger through normal identification. Shifeng could see only Xianxia's name. Both her level and tier were in question marks even after utilizing omniscient eyes. The only additional information Shifeng managed to obtain was Xianxia's level and class. Xianxia, human, Grandmaster forger. Level 200. HP. Speak. Why have you come looking for me? Xianxia asked as she tidied up her forging materials. If it were any other player, Xianxia would have most likely chased them away by now. However, Shifeng was the player who had helped her become a Grandmaster forger. Hence, he received better treatment from her. I wish to have this weapon repaired, Shifeng said. He then took out 1,000 transformations from his bag with just a single glance. Xianxia's eyes immediately widened when she saw the broken sword, the flawed weapon. 1,000 transformations. This is great. With this, I can finally complete the weapon I designed before. Xianxia instantly appeared in front of Shifeng and snatched 1,000 transformations out of his hands, her eyes flashing with excitement.